Okay, so I have downloaded like three pictures here. So this is the Amazon Web Services logo, GitHub logo, and Google Developers logo, right? So I just renamed this, by the way, to make the relative finding of these images much easier. I don't want to write the whole name of the file downloaded, so I just renamed this for better usability. So I'm just gonna copy this, go to my atom here, and I'm going to search for the folder that I'm working on. So I'm just gonna right click and say show in Explorer, and it should open up right beneath, and I'm going to open this, and inside my illustration folder, I'm gonna put these three images. Notice something, that this is really important. If you want to include your images inside your HTML document, you can have it in multiple ways. Either the images should be in the same place as the HTML document that is referencing them. Again, the images, number one, this is the first option, the images should be in the same directory, in the same folder, which is in this case illustration, as the HTML file that is using them. That's one. Another option is that the images can be in a specific individual folder called, for example, images, and this is the best practice, by the way, and I'm going to do this in front of you just in a minute. The third option is that the images can be taken from a URL from online, being hosted on another server, okay, and I'm going to show you this as well. So let's take the first trial here, or the first option here. The images is in the same folder as my HTML file, okay. So if I want to include an image, I can just hit the image tag, and you can see that the image has a specific kind of attributes or properties that you will not possibly find in any of the other tags. That is the source property and the alternative property or attribute, okay? These are specific for the image, so you cannot go to the span, for example, and write something like source. It's not gonna identify what is that source. The span doesn't have a single or a specific topic or a specific property that is called source, so that's just false, okay? And notice that an image is just like the meta and the HRs. It's a void element. It doesn't have a closing pair, all right? So in the source, you write the path of the directory or the path of the image, which is inside the folder, okay? If it happens, and this is the first option, this is the easiest one, but this is just for you to know, this is not the best practice, because you're gonna find that your code base, your project folder, contains so much images or so many images that are irrelevant. In our project folder, we should be more organized. We should have our coding files in one place, our images, or as we say, assets, as we're gonna see in just a minute when we get to host our website. The assets or the images should be in a specific folder. If we are using any other stuff, it should be in a specific folder as well. So you need to be having a structure for your project, okay? But let's say that this is the first option, the easiest one, which is having the images in the same folder, okay? So if I want to reference that image, I can just say the image name, right? So if I want to include AWS, I can just say AWS, and notice the extension is really important here, aws.png, and that's it, okay? If I hit Control S and I went to my website here, you're gonna see that this is way too big, okay? So we can control how this looks like, right? By giving a width and a height. Usually the width and the height are being controlled from CSS, but we can control it from this HTML tag as well. So we can have a width property. Notice how it's writing here, it's mentioning that this is an image specific tag, okay? And let's say that this is, for example, 100 pixel. Let's make it a square, right? White space, height, and let's give it something like 100 pixel. Okay, I didn't talk about alternative yet, but just give me a minute, all right? So we have the image that has the width and the height. Let's see how this looks like. Well, it doesn't look that good, right? So let's see how can we make the width a little bit bigger so the image looks like not compressed like that, right? So you can say the width, maybe it's gonna be 200, maybe this is gonna fix it. Well, some people might think that this is looking good, but to me it doesn't look that good. So in a case like this where you want to find the extremely perfect sizing, you can just use the developer tools. It's there for you. So you can just right click on this image like this, inspect element, and go to where we said that this is the width, right? So this is the width in my case, right? So I'm just going to double click on the width, and with my arrow key, up arrow key, I'm just going to open this one. So you know exactly what I'm doing. Okay. So this is the image. I've just hit inspect element, go to the width, double click, and using the up arrow key, keep on incrementing, keep on pressing like that, and just hit enter. And you're gonna see that now, I'm just gonna make this, you're gonna see that the image has changed. And notice that we have increased the image width to 262, right? 262. But in the actual code source, you're not gonna find that this has been changed. Okay, so whatever we do in the developer tools are volatile. All right, if you change the width, if you change the height, all of these are volatile changes. Let me just change the height as well. Double click on the height, and either down arrow or up arrow, whatever you feel that you want to do, like this. I'm just gonna increase it and hit enter. Now the height is 194. Okay, and still this does not reflect in my code base. The height here is the original height that I have in my HTML file is 100 pixels. Okay, so all of these changes are volatile, meaning that if I just came to this website and reloaded or refreshed, everything is going to get back to normal as it is from our code file, which is the HTML file. So in our HTML, it's 200 and 100. It's the same thing after refreshing. But the developer tools gives you a great sense of how things should be like if I want to make some trial and error till I find the best matching width for this image. Okay, so this is something that you can use. So let's just say that the width can be something like this, and let's increase the height to be like that. I think this is fairly good, so I'm just going to stick to 245 and 120 and 120. I think this is good. Once you control S, by the way, it's the same as refreshing. You're gonna see that this is the things that we have written inside our HTML document here in Atom. Okay, all right, great. This is the first option, so I'm just gonna write a small heading to denote what we are doing. So this is option 1 of including image, okay, where images are in the same directory of the HTML file. All right, it's a good time to close this Karnak because it's really annoying. All right, let's take another option. So this is, for example, going to be option 2. So option 2, images are in a specific directory. Okay, so now let's say that I'm going to put this GitHub, for example, right, in a directory called images. And this is, by the way, this is the best practice to have the assets in a specific folder. So this is a best practice like that. And I'm going to delete this image, and I'm going to my directory, show in Explorer, go to this guy, and now let's say that the illustration, I'm going to change the structure here a little bit. So instead of having all of the images in one place, I'm just going to leave the AWS, which is the option 1. I'm going to get GitHub and Google Diffs logo and put them in a directory inside my illustration folder. I'm just going to call this images. Notice how things are reflected in my Atom. So when I hit enter, we have an image created there. Okay, so I'm just going to put this there. Okay, so inside my illustration now I have a specific folder for images, and this is the best practice that you should follow. So let's make an image tag, and let's reference the, for example, the github.png. So let's just write github.png. All right, so if you think about it for a minute, this is not going to show up in our browser. See, it's not finding the location of the GitHub image. All right, so before we tell you the reason behind this, we can just say what the alternative does. So let's say that the alternative here is there for you, this property is there for you, just to say what happens if the developer maybe mispronounced the image name. Like what happens if I added something like a B, right? Well, let's try it on the AWS one. Okay, so this is the AWS here. What happens if I added a more characters? That's not the image name, by the way. It's just AWS, so it's not going to show up. So it's going to say tell you that this is a broken image. So the alternative is there for this purpose. We can just say something like an AWS logo. So whoever sees this website, he's going to know that there is an AWS logo in this area, but probably the developer messed up the spelling, or the server is now down that is hosting the images. It's not replying to requests properly, so the image is not being hosted properly, or maybe the internet connection at the client, the user who's displaying this site, maybe the internet connection is poor. That's why you're seeing a broken image. Okay, so that's what the alternative does. So I'm just gonna name it correctly, and let's go back to our GitHub. Why is it not showing? I'm just gonna say that this is a GitHub logo. Okay, so it's telling me this is the GitHub logo. So why is it not? This is not showing. Well, what happens is that this GitHub can be found. Notice that the index.html typically starts searching for anything that you reference in the same folder, meaning that for this index.html that we are opening here, whenever you say that I'm referencing AWS, it's gonna start in the same level, right? So in the same level here, I have, what do I have in the same level? I have images, I have AWS, and I have index. So in the same level inside illustration, I'm gonna start searching for something called aws.bng. In the same level, the index.html will find it, and once it's found, it can just include it there. That's why it's popping up, it's appearing. But what happens if you have something that is not in the same level? What happens if I have a file that is one level deep? So here, the index.html is going to search for github.bng. It's not going to find it. But if I specifically told the HTML file to search one level deep inside images folder, so if I tell it something like, please look for this github.bng inside images, and a / like this. So inside images, go one level deep and search for something called, this is going one level deep. This is just as expanding this. And search for something inside images here, inside images, search for something called github.bng. Okay, so if I save this now, you're gonna see that the image is appearing, all right? Okay, let's do the same trick because this is way too big, so I'm just gonna add some width and height properties. Width and height, let's have this as 200 pixels, and this is a 200 pixels as well. Okay, that's fairly good. Now let's think, or maybe you have 4 options. Let me show you something that you might stumble upon. Not all of you will go through this problem, but just for you to know what is this kind of relative path thing. These are called relative paths, right? So a relative path is some path, an image name or a file name that is relevant to the folder that I'm in. See, this image is relative to the root folder, which is the illustration that the index.html is inside. This is what's called a relative path, okay? So the third option can be something that a little bit weird, but let's say images that are in a specific directory which is outside. Why is it doing this? Outside the root directory. Okay, so here we had images which were in a specific folder that were inside, or let's say level deep, level or levels deep, our root directory. All right, so the image here, okay, the image folder is one level deep inside our root directory, which is the illustration. So what happens if I have something that is outside the illustration? Maybe the image is outside the illustration. How can we find this? Okay, so to introduce this to you, I'm just going to remove this. to show you the example of outside the illustration folder, and I'm going to go there and show in File Explorer. Okay, so let me just take an image out of these. I'm going to take Google Divs, and this is where this is the root folder that has our index.html. This is the illustration. Okay, it has these 3 folders. I'm going to go one level up to the week 1. So this is one level up. Week 1 has illustration, lab activities, and lecture activities, right? And I'm going to put this image there. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. All right, so the image now is not inside our root folder that contains the index.html, that contains the website page, but it is like the image is not in the same directory as the index, but it is like one level up or one level before the root folder that contains the index. Okay, so in situations like this, we can just try to reference it. It's not going to work, but let's just do this. Google, try to write the name just as it is. It's called Google Divs. Any misspellings is not going to reference the image correctly. Okay, and this is a Google Div logo. Okay, so if I went to my website, you're not gonna see that this is appearing, and that makes sense. Okay, so let's now tell the HTML document, the index.html, to go search for a level up, right? Not level deep, not something like images slash, right? But go out of the right? So go out of the folder, that you're in, right? So we are telling the index.html to go out of the folder that you are in, which is the illustration, and to go out, we do something like this, .. Okay, notice that all of these are just Linux commands, right? These are command lines. Okay, so do not do anything of what I will do right now, but I just want to show you that all of these are just Linux stuff. I think it also works on Windows. It's the same command line commands, right? So let's say that I'm going to go what happens if I want to open a directory in Linux? You want to open a directory just as you double click on something by using cd or change directory, right? So let's say that I want to go one level up, one level before. I want to be in my folder that is called users. So I'm just gonna hit ... So now I am in one level up. Let's try this one more time. You're going to be in your disk drive C. Okay, let's do this one more time. And you're gonna be in a folder called mount. Let me just do something called ls. Again, do not do this. I'm just introducing these kind of commands because these are the essence of what are we doing. These are the essence of all of these relative paths. If you understand how these actually work on the operating system level, you're gonna understand how it works in your HTML files level. Okay, so ls lists whatever inside this folder. So let's do ls. So ls now contains 3 folders. What if I want to go to my drive D? So I'm going to do open the drive D or cd drive D. So cd, the folder name. Okay, and this is going to open the drive D or local disk D, right? If I say something like list, it's going to give me all of the files that I have in my disk D. So this is equivalent to going to drive D, clicking here, and you're going to see all of these elements listed in front of you. So this is the same thing as I did here. Everything is being listed in the drive D. Okay, so what happens if I created a folder? Let's just create this from, I don't want to make things really hard on you, but let's just say I'm going to create a folder in my drive D and call it test web. This is the name of the folder. Okay, now I can say open test web, and now I am inside test web. This is equivalent to double clicking on test web and getting there from the GUI, from the file explorer. This is the file explorer, this one, but we are doing the same thing from the command line. Okay, so you are inside test web now. What if you want to go back one level back? What if you want to go back to Lenovo D or local disk D? You just hit this backspace and you are in the local disk D. This is equivalent to saying cd ... and now I am in my local disk D. So ... essentially means one level back. So let's just go to our test web again. If I wanted to go 2 levels back, I am in my test web folder from the file explorer. If I want to go to the PC, so you go back 2 times, right? Or you just click on this PC and you are back like 2 levels back. From the command line, how do we do that? We can go 2 levels back by doing the following. This is going to return 1 level back, so you will be back to the disk D. So if you want to go 2 levels back, just say ... Okay, so this is going to return you, the first ... is going to return you to D, and the second ... is going to return you to mount. So this is going to go back 2 levels up. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind all of these relative paths. It's not something that is dependent or specific to HTML. This is the point that I want you to understand. That's just a command line thing. That's just an operating system thing. Okay, so now I'm telling the HTML, the index HTML, that please, this Google Divs, you will not find it in the folder that you are inside. You are not going to find the Google Divs inside illustration. So how about you go 1 level up? How about you search in week 1? So I'm gonna tell him, please go to week 1, go 1 level up. Now this means that I am in week 1. This means that I am inside week 1, the upper or the parent folder. Inside week 1, which this is indicating by this part, inside week 1, search for Google Divs. And it should find it inside week 1. See, this week 1 has Google Divs now. So if I hit Control S, you're gonna see that the Google Divs is appearing. So what happens if more complicated stuff is going on? What if I say that this image, which is inside week 1, is actually, I'm this kind of an annoying person, so I'm just going to make images outside. Okay, so I'm going to have a specific folder outside my project folder. In my case, my project folder that contains the index.html is called illustration. So I'm going to have an images outside folder, which is outside the project folder, and have the Google Divs inside of it. Once you do that, you're going to see that the image has disappeared. It can't find it. So, by the way, this is not a good practice. I'm just illustrating to you what does a relative path means. Typically, you are going to go for option 2, where we are inside our project folder. We are going to have a specific 1 level deep, not 1 level up, 1 level deep. We're going to have a specific images folder that contains our all assets and images. So this is the best options. But this is just for you to understand what are things, what if things are this way? How are we going to deal with it, right? So now, going 1 level up to week 1, it's not going to do the trick. So we are going to tell the index.html to continue searching for Google Divs. Once you go to the 1 level up here, once you go to the parent week 1, while you are inside week 1, which is denoted by this part, please take a look inside images outside. So once you are inside week 1, take a look inside images, right? Outside. Okay? And inside images outside, start searching inside the folder here and start searching for Google Divs.png. And if you hit Control S, and this would work. Okay? Now let's have some width here. So I'm just going to copy this. It's not gonna look the most beautiful thing in the world, so let's inspect element and use the same trick for the width. And let's make it something like 400 or 350. All right, one more. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I'm sorry if I'm bothering you with this. I think we need more. Okay. All right, that is enough. We can just type it. You can just say 650. And I think this does the trick. So let's stick with 650 or 650. Okay. All right. So let's go back there, and this is our things so far. And as we've been discussing, images and spans are inline elements, inline level elements. So if I went and make a new image, how about I do this? Like, I'm just going to make these Google Divs images be next to each other, right? So since these are in line, they're gonna stack next to each other. Okay, they are going like beneath each other just because we have opened the what we call the developer tools. So I can just put the developer tools. There was a way to put the developer tools. How did we used to do that? Yeah, we can dog it to the bottom, and now it is beside each other. Okay, so if you hovered over any of these images, you're gonna see that the content or the width is specifically what the image is taking. That's why it's an inline, and the same thing for that one, right? All right, notice that the same way we can add I think we can add stuff from there. Yeah, edit as HTML. The same way we can, on the browser, using the developer tools, tweak the width and the height in a volatile manner that is not going to be saved. We can add HTML tags as well, just to see how things are going to look like. So after the first image, I can just say BR, like this. Okay. So once you hit BR, write BR, it's gonna go one level deep. And notice that in my HTML file, there is no PRs between the image, the first image and the second. There is nothing in between. So these are volatile, okay? So I can do the same thing. I can add multiple BRs, just right click on these three dots and edit as HTML. We can add another BR or multiple BRs for new lines and click on this small arrow here and it's going to be saved. And notice that the space has increased. Once you hit refresh, all of these things are going to be removed. There is no BRs anymore. Okay, so I can just come here if I want things to stack vertically and add a line breaker, and here we go. Okay, I hope this is clear. The next videos are going to be mentioning the anchor tags and the lists, and these are the last thing that we have done in the first lab. One last thing, because I told you that there are like 4 options that you can use in order to include an image. So you can include an image from a URL. So this is option 4, including an image from a URL. That is not an image. All right. So I'm just gonna remove all of this and let's just make a new image tag that is empty. And let's search for an image. Let's go to Google. And let's search for something, I don't know. Let's search for Arduino logo. Okay, so let's go there and pick this image and let's say, where is it? Copy link address. And let's put that link address there. It's going to be really broad. And let's go to the website. All right, so you are not going to find this working. Nothing is appearing here because, and good thing that I made this mistake in front of you. Taking an image from Google like this by copying a link address, maybe this is not sufficient. So I need to open up the image actual website and go to the image itself, and this is where the image link can be found. So we can just say copy, and let's just change this URL to this one. And if I went to website, you can see that this is appearing now. And you can give it the same exact stuff. You can give it a width and a height. Okay, but it looks really ugly now, so you can just make it squared like this. Okay, but one downside to this is that maybe the server that is hosting this image, if it wasn't yours, then that's not reliable. Maybe the server is not running. Maybe the server got down, so the image is not appearing. So do not rely heavily on taking images from another servers, right? Or taking images that are hosted elsewhere. Unless the images are hosted on a server that you own, that you know that is going to be running all the time, that's good to do. Otherwise, just stick to having the images locally hosted, or maybe, you know, going to a website or a server that you know that is going to be always currently running, something like Wikipedia or I don't know, some image source that you know that is going to be running forever, or not forever, most of the time, okay? Or your own server, okay? But notice that this is going to take some time to load whenever you open up the website. So we are going to need some JavaScript to handle this error. It's not some kind of an error, but we can handle, how can we parse the image or the stuff that needs to be loaded just the minute the website opens, before anything else. Okay, this is something called asynchronous loading. All right, I'm going to introduce this part to you whenever we get to JavaScript. For those who are willing to use something like this, or who are depending on external dependencies, links, images, minified CSS, or any kind of things that are being taken externally from another website, we have a way in JavaScript to make sure that this is being loaded first thing whenever the website is being opened. Okay.